Now, as we continue in Esther in chapters 3 and 4, we're introduced to the main villain of the story. It's this guy named Haman. Haman, who decides to try and kill all of the Jews in Persia. Now, when we meet Haman, we find out that he is the second most powerful person in the Persian Empire, but he's also a pompous jerk who thinks that everyone should bow down to him. Let's take a look. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not bow down or show him respect, he was filled with rage. He had learned of Mordecai's nationality, so he decided it was not enough to lay hands on Mordecai alone. Instead, he looked for a way to destroy all the Jews throughout the entire empire of Xerxes. So what happens is, as Haman's walking through the streets of the city, he sees Mordecai, and Mordecai refuses to bow down to him. And he understands that Mordecai is a Jew, and evidently Haman hated the Jews so much that he said, I'm going to give them a lesson once and for all, and he makes this plan to kill all of the Jewish people. Now, how does he convince the king to go through this plan? What he does is he tells the king that there's this people that he hates. He doesn't say who they are, but he says, we hate this people, and he says, if you let me kill them, you are going to get a lot of money, king. And Xerxes needed money because he had lost a lot of his fortune fighting the Greeks for 3 years, and so because of that, the king says, okay, go ahead and carry out your plans. And so Haman decides that he is going to exterminate all the Jews, including Mordecai, in about 11 months from this time, from this date. Well, look what happens next. Mordecai appeals to Esther for help. So all the Jewish people in Persia, they find out that Haman has gotten the king to create this law that the Jewish people are going to be slaughtered in almost a little less than a year. And so Mordecai and a lot of the Jewish people, they start to go into mourning. They wear clothes that show that they are sad. So Esther hears about this and she says, Mordecai, why are you sad? And Mordecai understands this is his opportunity to appeal to the queen of Persia to see if she can help deliver her people. Now remember, nobody knows yet that she's a Jew. So look what happens. Look what Mordecai says to her. Mordecai sent this reply to Esther. Don't think for a moment that because you're in the palace, you will escape when all other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this? You see what's happening is Mordecai said, Esther, you need to go and talk to your husband. But there's this weird custom, this weird law that nobody could just go and walk in on the king. Like, there were only 7 people in the entire kingdom who were allowed to go and talk to the king whenever they wanted, basically. But the queen was not one of those. And so you were risking your life to go before the king if he didn't send for you. What would happen is you'd go before the king, and if he raised his scepter for you, you were okay. But if he didn't raise his scepter, then you were in a lot of trouble. Then you would be killed. And so Esther's afraid of this. But Mordecai says, Esther, you can't be afraid. If the Jewish people are slaughtered, you're going to get slaughtered too. They're going to find you out eventually. But look what Mordecai believes. He believes he has this faith in God, that God will rescue and deliver the Jewish people. And he says to Esther, Esther, somebody, somehow, some way, God, even though he doesn't use the name, God will save the Jewish people. Maybe you are the one that he is going to use to rescue your people. And so Esther, she says, okay, maybe I'm going to die. I don't know. Remember, they didn't know the end of the story. She says, maybe I'm going to die, but I'm going to do this. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try and save my people. And this is a turning point in Esther's life, where she goes from being this young woman who was forced into all these things to becoming this woman who trusts in God and is a person of high moral character. And this teaches us something important. Everyone faces turning points in their lives. This is Esther's big turning point in her life, where she can say, you know what, God, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to try and do this. Or she could have shrinked back and said, nah, it's somebody else's job to save my people. I'm good. I don't want to get found out. But she chose to risk herself. She decided to trust God and risk her own life. And you and I are faced with situations all the time where we have turning points in our lives, where we have to decide, am I going to trust God or not? Am I going to fight for my marriage and try and rescue my marriage or not? Am I going to do what is ethical and right in my business or not? Am I at school going to do what is honoring to God, or am I going to cheat on my test because all my friends do it? We all have these turning points. Some are really big. Some are big life-changing decisions. Some are little decisions. But we all face turning points in our lives. And Esther is a demonstration of how God wants us to think about these turning points, that maybe God has put you in this place for such a time as this, such a time to step out in faith and to trust him and to honor him, even when it's hard, even when it's scary. And that's what Esther learned. And in the next lesson, we'll find out what happens to her.